My lawyer father informed his partners I was wrong. My sister married the Iraqi soldier I rescued from a blazing Humvee. She doesn't know. Due to their error, I won't attend her wedding tonight. I will be the unanticipated consequence. I'm Captain Nora Hayes. I'm 33 and have lived a life of integrity, discipline, and quiet service for 15 years. The October afternoon in Arlington, Virginia, was crisp and autumnal. I witnessed the Old Guard, the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, do their drills flawlessly from the parade field at Fort Myer. Every coordinated boot heel crack against pavement. Every rifle snap to the shoulder was a notation in order. My world was built on honor, and everyone was a vital link in a holy chain of responsibility. Your name and activities were identical here. Back in my little, nice apartment, peace set in immediately. My refuge had a clear view of the Oima Memorial. Its silent figures symbolized sacrifice and will. Making Earl Grey tea, scented with bergamot, was a comforting ritual. Inhaled the calm. It wasn't gifted. It was my prize for defeating demons abroad and my personal ghosts. The peace was a fortress and I built it painfully piece by brick. Then I saw, in a neat stack of invoices and army paperwork on the tiny wooden table by the door was an ivory-colored envelope. Unnatural energy appeared to radiate from it. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. I immediately recognized it. My mother Vivian Lancaster used pricey Conqueror cardstock for her most significant social announcements. It declared status before reading a word. It had no return address. Of course, not. It wasn't mail. A summons. I lifted it with shaky hands. A wedding invitation for my sister Claire was inside. Her attractive fiancé held her arm as she smiled at me professionally. The couple looked wonderful from a polished world that was never mine. But when I saw the groom's name I gasped. Elegant script Ethan Walker. Not possible. Name broke part of me. Apartment. I left Arlington suddenly. Instead of bergamot blazing gasoline. Refrigerator hum became tormented metal screech. No wedding chapel but the Iraqi desert, his eyes wide with dread, hit me hard. My hand shook. I nearly lost the pricey invitation. Ethan Walker. The man I had pulled from a burning Humvee. How did they find him? And why? I forced my eyes back to the invitation, flipping it over and the phrase, "We would be so delighted to have you there," was embossed in shimmering gold ink, a polite, hollow sentiment, but the handwritten line below it on the guest's namespace made my blood freeze. Nora Hayes wasn't mentioned. My mother's lovely words, looping cursive Nora Hayes. One letter, one intentional misspelling. A mistake wasn't made. Not from my detail-oriented mother. Lost forks during dinner parties were a serious sin. This was surgical brutality administered with sniper accuracy. Added, "You are an afterthought. You are an inconvenience we are forced to acknowledge. You are a detail so unimportant that we can't even be bothered to get your name right," was a subtle dismissive gesture you could never establish was intended, leaving you to bleed out alone. Why? A hoarse whisper was smothered by silence. My head reeled attempting to connect the cruelest dots. Why Ethan specially? Invite me why? Then give this soul-crushing insult. I felt the weight of 20 years of such times as I stood there. I closed my eyes and grabbed the invitation with white knuckles. The serenity prayer mantra I learned to lean on began to develop in my head. A desperate storm anchor search. God give me peace. But a colder, stronger voice interrupted it. My father, the powerful DC lawyer, spoke at a cocktail party years ago. He was talking to a partner assuming I was out of earshot. I imagined him standing next to me as he said, "This girl," gesturing vaguely, "my way. This girl was a mistake." The heavy cardstock in my hand felt more like an admission ticket to a place I had spent my entire adult life trying to escape. The personal curated museum of my own pain. Each memory was a carefully preserved exhibit, a testament to a long and systematic campaign of quiet dismissals and polite cruelties. The first example was when I was 24. I was a young lieutenant granted special leave to attend a Kennedy Center gala where my father's law firm was honored. I felt a surge of pride, a naive hope that they might finally see me. I wore my Army service uniform, class dress blues pressed to perfection. That evening, a photographer took a beautiful family portrait on the grand staircase, with my father beaming, my mother the picture of social grace, my sister Sophie sparkling in a designer dress, and me standing tall and proud beside them. A few weeks later, my mother posted the photo on her Facebook page, but she had cropped me out. When I finally had the courage to call and ask why, she sighed. A long, weary sound, as if I were a difficult child. "Oh, Nora, honey," she said, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "That uniform, it's just so rigid. It didn't match the evening's elegance. You comprehend?" She lacked understanding or refused to accept that the uniform she disliked represented everything I had sacrificed to gain it. It represented the holidays I missed, the friendships that departed, and the physical and mental toll of a road she and my father had always considered disappointing. She didn't see me as a patriot daughter. I was a fashion faux pas that disrupted her ideal Hayes family image. The silent medal was the second exhibit. In Iraq, I received my first Bronze Star with the V device for heroism. I did nothing. It was for recognition, but I sent a copy home when the formal orders arrived. Not to boast. The message was basic and desperate. "I'm okay. I'm working well. Be proud of me." Deafening silence followed. No call of congratulations. No email, nothing. I searched for a book on a short break months later. My father's vast home office has mahogany and leather-bound law books. I saw a stack of law periodicals by coincidence, tableside. My APO sent manila envelope was half hidden behind them. It remained shut. My heart didn't rupture. It felt like a million tiny pointy bits broke apart. My bravery, survival, success. The effort of opening an envelope was pointless. My existence was trash mail to be filed and forgotten. Just moments later, I saw something much crueler. It stands proudly on the marble mantelpiece over the fireplace was new. Claire's marketing agency awarded her Employee of the Month certificate in a garish gold frame. Her tiny office triumph was lauded and exhibited, while my medal, gained in death, languished unopened in the shadows. The message was plain. Real and important was her universe. My abstraction caused me difficulty and mild shame. Only one oasis existed in that huge desert of apathy, my grandfather, George Hayes. He was a World War II veteran with few words but keen eyes. He looked at me but didn't say much. He saw me. He was the only one at my West Point graduation. Naturally, my parents attended, their applause polite but distant, their smiles strained. They had a duty there. Grandpa George helped me. He hugged me tightly in his pipe tobacco-scented old tweed jacket. In honesty, I heard his gruff, emotional whisper. "My girl, they don't respect honor." Yes, I understand. He died in Afghanistan while I was deployed. The news took a week to reach me. After reaching Claire, her voice seemed detached. Nora stated it was a modest family service. We didn't want to bother. A private service. A family acquaintance told me the private event was a large memorial at Washington National Cathedral. Hundreds of judges, lawmakers, and community leaders participated. People didn't only grieve him. They deleted me from the last chapter of my only true love. They kept me from saying farewell. I held the invitations in my apartment. That final heinous deed weighed on me. He validated my choices and was my anchor. His trust in me was my life foundation. And I must. Did you ever have that person? The one who noticed you when no one else did, and whose memory you struggle to preserve, even when the world tries to erase. I inherited honor from my grandfather. My family tried to bury it. They didn't realize honor couldn't be framed or cropped. Fire formed it, which you carry in your soul. I wondered what became of his actual legacy. Behind. My grandfather knew honor. My family didn't. They saw my life as a succession of questionable choices that deviated from their respectable route. The outfit was there, but not the person. They missed the moments that determined honor's cost. Never saw Fallujah. The memory is clear. It's burned into my brain with awful clarity. The ambient temperature was 120 degrees, but the Humvee was tight. Furnace. The Iraqi desert's fine talcum powder-like dust coated your teeth, lungs, and spirit. Hell broke out while we patrolled a narrow market street. No warning, just a thunderous concussive blast that split the air apart and rained superheated metal. 3 of my soldiers were in the convoy's lead vehicle when an IED exploded. Thrown on its side, it became a mangled. The scene was chaos, smoke, and screams. Men she snapped within were drowned out by the unexpected crackling of AK-47 fire from the roofs. The kill zone ambush was classic. My radio started up. The Tactical Operations Center commander barking in my ear from miles away in an air-conditioned tent. Alpha 6, stay put. Air support is needed. I saw fire. They were licking the petrol tank. A fire river heading for disaster. Air support was minutes away. My men had seconds. I couldn't wait, it was death. My officer's oath wasn't advice. A blood pact. I never abandon a fallen comrade. Now covering fire, I said via my radio. Order to my platoon. I sprang from my car and smacked the hot pavement. I crouched, the ground like a frying pan against my gear. Bullets sped over my head, hissing and stirring up dust. Around me, every foot I gained was a death risk. Teeth-gritting prayer. After reaching the smoldering wreck, the heat seemed like it was tearing my face off. A frail arm reached out from the twisted frame through the thick black smoke. Sergeant Peters. Alive with adrenaline, I grabbed him and pulled hard. The fire and bullets drowned out his groans, making him a lifeless weight. I forced him, behind an adjacent wall's disintegrating corner. Terrible cover. Then I turned. Another 2 males were inside. I had to return. Flames were inside the cabin. Time was running out. I was nearly overpowered by smoke on my 3rd excursion into that fire, my lungs burning. A young soldier's leg was pinned under the crushed dashboard. Silent primal dread filled his eyes. His body was too weak to yell. Private Ethan Walker. Him I knew. The man was kid who wrote home to his high school girlfriend every moment he could. He wrote neatly and optimistically. Nobody had time to consider. My rifle but hit the twisted metal binding his leg. The back of my hand was burned by a piece of jagged, burning hot shrapnel. I roared in pain, but I ignored it. My final strength was used to loop my arms under his shoulders and pull. I dragged him clear just as a secondary explosion, likely the gasoline tank, exploded behind us, destroying the Humvee. In my arms, he was unconscious but breathing. Breathing shallowly, his chest rose and sank. My scorched fingers she snapped as I searched for his dog tags. I clutched the cool metal, his name etched in my hand. I silently promised the unconscious youngster in my arms that he would return home. Now, I examined my hands in my quiet Arlington flat. I could feel the phantom heat even though the ivory invitation was flawless. My right hand's burned ghost. Over time, the scar disappeared, but the memory stayed with me. My granddad saw this honor. My family never understood this value. It was absent from a Kennedy Center gala. The dust and blood, the choice to dash into the flames when every instinct advised against, contained it, yelled to escape. After hell, how do you find peace? You find it with your companions. I visited Arlington National Cemetery the next morning before the light broke through the mist. I needed to attend. Recalibrating my soul was necessary to remove the invitation's toxicity. At the unknown soldier's tomb, I observed the guard change. Sentinel moved with accuracy like a calibrated instrument. Machine. 21 steps. He stopped, turned, and faced the grave for 21 seconds. Another 21 steps. The solemn hush was broken only by his heel clicks. I silently repeated the Sentinel's creed, which I had memorized while watching. It promises excellence, discipline, and selflessness. I fully commit to this noble duty. Despite my coldness, I'm never heartless. These holy grounds were no place for recklessness, tolerance for selfishness. Everyone here recognized the significance of their attire. My Potosi, Maryland relatives thought my uniform was weird. This trust was holy. This was my genuine family. Bonded by oath, not blood. A family with complete regard for the dead and each other. The peace in that location soothed my broken spirit and reassured me that I was part of something bigger than my agony. Sergeant First Class Williams, a lifer with 20 years of service stamped on his face, joined me after the ceremony. He stared out at the unending, precisely lined rows of white headstones across the rolling hills. Not at me. "You're carrying something heavy, Captain," he replied quietly. Not a question. The assertion was true. I breathed deeply without realizing it. "Holding. Sergeant, family matters." He nodded slowly, knowing. He requested no specifics. He didn't probe. His simple acknowledgement was more comforting than 1,000 words. Just recognized the burden. Our quiet was long, watching a lone groundskeeper tend to distant grass. He concluded, still staring at the horizon, that sometimes, it's not the hardest battle. This is home. The end. He only needed that, say. In that moment, I didn't need to explain the invisible scars or years of feeling ghostly at home. He knew they all knew differently. The wordless understanding we shared was deeper than any chat with my father. Later that day, the plain Fort Myer messal gave me more quiet strength. I sat at a big table with several junior lieutenants just starting off. They were discussing their training course obstacles and assignment worries. They fell silent as I gave some suggestions based on my personal experiences. Every word was absorbed as they listened intently. Nobody interrupted. Nobody rejected my viewpoint. They were more than polite. They respected my collar rank and experience. A young, straight-backed private approached me after lunch. "Excuse me, Captain," he said respectfully. "I had a question about uniform regulations for the upcoming ceremony." "Ma'am," it was the tiny things, the respectful ma'am, the caring sergeant nod, the quiet junior officers. These bricks created my fortress. They were frequent, gentle reminders of my worth. My worth wasn't determined at a DC event or PWC mansion. It was forged in this shared obligation universe, reciprocal regard. This universe kept me together as well as the other. Family's world appeared designed to pull me apart. I remembered Sergeant Williams's words. "The hardest battle is at home." And I felt dread and resolution as I prepared to enter there. I heard my phone beep on the kitchen counter a few days after the invitation. My mother's name and a Vivaldi ringtone she insisted I set years ago appeared on the screen. It felt like a show. After the final Baroque notes faded, I took a big breath and answered, preparing for emotional gymnastics. "Nora, honey." Vivian Lancaster reserved her warm, buttery voice for public events and challenging phone calls. A mom who hadn't spoken to her daughter in months wanted to sound like they had just talked yesterday. "I'm delighted you got invited. Just mentioning at the club how much we're anticipating your arrival." Far too long. Silence worked better than argument, so I kept quiet. Her brightness was meant to disarm me and make my opposition look churlish and ungrateful. She continued, smoothly switching into her signature faux concern. "The wedding will be formal. It's at the Congressional Country Club with several of your father's key associates, off K Street. Important crowd. I want you to be comfortable." I knew her definition of comfortable. Years of use honed the code phrase. Signified invisibility. Signified simple. Don't be yourself. Don't be the daughter who chose grit over galas. Don't remind our powerful pals, who measure success by stock portfolios and Hamptons vacation homes, that part of our wonderful, they find family deeply strange and disappointing. After establishing false affection and imprecise warnings, she attacked. "And Nora," she whispered conspiratorially, as if sharing a private secret with us. "About your work, I thought you shouldn't discuss too much about the army. You understand, dear." I felt a tad hefty for a happy mood. Intense for a celebration. She didn't finish. "This was just the opening salvo. Perhaps," she said, the suggestion slick with manipulation, her voice now oozing with helpfulness. "You could just say you're doing strategic security consulting for something like that. It sounds so much more civilian, more chic. It would be easier for your father's friends to understand, don't you think?" Even for her, this was a new low. She wanted me to lie, actively participate in my own eraser, and create a corporate-friendly identity to protect their fragile social standing, to dishonor the soldiers who had fallen beside me, to negate the very oath I had sworn to uphold. Also, their affluent guests wouldn't feel awkward. It was the ultimate insult delivered with the loving concern of the mother who had given me life, and then spent it trying to reshape me. But I didn't scream, forge, but my voice when I finally spoke was as cold and sharp as shrapnel. "I will wear something appropriate, Mother," I said, each word deliberate and measured. "And I will be myself, Captain Nora Hayes, United States Army." Vivian Lancaster let out a long theatrical sigh, the sound of a wounded matriarch. My dress blues and camouflage ACUs were my truth, but for this battle I needed different armor. My eyes bypassed them. They were what my family expected, a confirmation of their belief that I was rigid. No. My hand reached past them, settling on a perfectly tailored dark. Mother wanted, nor the uniform she despised. It was a statement of power, professionalism, and unassailable control. I wouldn't play their game, I'd play mine. After the call ended, I didn't throw the phone, slam a fist against the wall, or cry. I stood motionless in the center of my living room, surrounded by silence, squall. It was a cold fury, a focused glacial force that had been building for 33 years. It was the moment a soldier stops being defensive and starts planning an offensive. My mother's words were the spark, but my father's were the fuel. A long-suppressed memory surfaced with chilling clarity. It was a Christmas party at their Toic home, quiet. He thought I couldn't hear. Investing in Claire is investing in the future, he said with a self-satisfied chuckle. Investing in Nora? That's a sympathy higher. 15 years of service, multiple deployments, sleepless nights, constant vigilance, friends I lost and lives saved. All of it in his world was a tax write-off. The last straw broke my silence and long-suffering endurance. They wanted me to be an invisible guest at their perfect wedding. Fine, I'd attend, but I'd be a mirror, reflecting their own ugliness back at them. The deep blue fabric of my Army service uniform symbolized my public self. It passed over my camouflage ACUs, the uniform of my raw, unfiltered reality. They were my identity, my pride. But I knew with a strategist's clarity that my weapon for this battle had to be more sophisticated. It had to be something from their own world turned against them. My fingers found it. A dark navy blue pantsuit from Theory, impeccably tailored. It was neither the soft feminine dress my mother would approve of nor the uniform she despised. It was a statement of a different key. I wouldn't attend as the discarded daughter. I would arrive as a field-grade officer, a leader, a woman who could no longer be dismissed or underestimated. I would play their game, but this time by my rules. Standing before the full-length mirror, the sharp lines of the suit jacket settling on my show. A good commander never goes into battle with just one weapon. I needed an ally, leverage, and an asset they could never anticipate. My grandfather George's rough but kind voice came to mind. He always told me, when powerful men use the rules to oppress, you use the rules to demand justice. He believed in the system, but he also believed in fighting for your place within it. Determined rhythm. I went to my old roll-top desk, the one he left me, and pulled out a worn leather-bound address book. My fingers flipped through the pages, past names of old friends and fallen comrades, searching for a name I hadn't contacted since that sham of a funeral. There it was, Alistair Finch, my grandfather's personal attorney, a man as old school and honorable as George himself. I picked up my phone, my hand steady, and dialed the number. An older, formal voice answered on the second ring. Alistair Finch. Mr. Finch, I said, my voice firm and clear as if I were issuing a command. This is Nora Hayes, George's granddaughter. The day after the call with my mother, I met Alistair Finch. We didn't meet in a sterile K Street office. Instead, we met in a park. Mr. Finch told me that my grandfathers used to hang out at a small coffee shop called Baked and Wired in a Georgetown alley. It had exposed brick, the smell of fresh-baked pastries, and a quiet, unassuming atmosphere far from my father's polished world. His voice was low and courteous, and he placed an old, worn leather briefcase on the tiny table between us and opened the brass latches with a definite click. Your grandfather was a visionary commander. First person outside the military to address me by rank in years. After a long desert day, it felt like cool water. He knew his family and was intelligent. He stopped letting the words weight settle. His will was unusual. Wills can be fought for years in court. That fight would have pleased your father. Your grandfather was smarter. He created an ironclad living trust to avoid that spectacle. A heavy bound portfolio was passed across the table to me. It was heavy to hold. His orders are copied. Nora, he expected this. A day when you need more than words to assert yourself. That night, sleep was impossible. A single bulb lit my kitchen table while I read. After reading for hours, the legal jargon faded to reveal the document's true meaning. This was more than legal paper. It was my grandfather's last daring act of love and recognition. It expressed his values. He wrote with Mr. Finch in precise language that the control of a philanthropic foundation worth millions that he developed during his lifetime, the Hayes Legacy Foundation, was not to be carried down by bloodline. Not a birthright. Instead, the chairmanship and controlling interest would go to the heir who most represents service, honor, and courage in adversity. It quoted service, honor, and courage, values my family had always dismissed as foolish and unprofitable. A specific airtight clause, provision requiring an impartial three-person commission chaired by a Leicester Finch to resolve disputes. Reading that passage again brought tears to my eyes. These weren't tears of avarice or money victory. They were soul-shaking sobs of validation. From thousands of miles away, my grandfather saw me during those years. He saw me for who I was despite my parents' silence and neglect. This trust went beyond assets. His final message illuminated me for years. It said, "I see you. I'm proud of you. Your path was the right one." The wedding day arrived with a weird and profound serenity. It's how soldiers feel before a well-planned mission. After reconnaissance, the goal and assets are evident. Though the conclusion is unpredictable, you did your best. Ability to prepare. Prepared. My preparations were rigorous. Navy blue pants suit creases were razor-sharp after pressing. I buffed my leather shoes to perfection. I carefully placed Mr. Finch's portfolio in a thin leather attach case. Not just a stack of papers. It was my weapon. My shield. It was my inheritance. The peaceful assurance persisted as I climbed into my car. I drove across Arlington's familiar streets to the Key Bridge, the entryway from Virginia to D.C. and Maryland. I didn't rue my past as my automobile climbed the bridge's arc, the Toac River below. I looked forward to the lush green hills of Potoac and the fancy country club where my family was celebrating a lie-based union. I no longer returned in shame as the rejected daughter. I was a commander entering enemy territory. The war was coming. I fought with others this time. My granddad was next to me in the passenger seat. They put me at table 12 in a 300-person ballroom with crystal chandeliers. Table 12 represented social Siberia. It was in a dim back corner near the kitchen's swinging double doors, so I could occasionally smell garlic and burnt butter. A greasy working-ass backdrop to the towering scentless orchid centerpieces on every other table. From this perspective, I was an afterthought, an obligation completed and buried. It also provided me a sniper's perspective of the stage, ideal for watching the night's events. I watched the hypocrisy parade like a combat observer. My father, Charles Hayes, was a polished, eloquent speaker at the podium. With the room in his hand, he was in his element. He praised his beloved Claire, Jewel, the daughter who had chosen well, gone to a decent private school, had an Ivy League degree, and married well. Introducing Ethan, a stranger, as his dream son, he toasts him. He never looked at me during his speech. At his feast, I was ghost. My mother was even more polished on stage. Family traditions and a solid foundation were her topics. Her statements implied a critique of my entire life. The foundation she spoke of was wealth and social status, not character. Just a sip of icy water. My neutral face was refined over years. Not an audience member tonight. I waited for the signal as a soldier. I looked at the head table. Ethan looked strained, his champagne flute untouched, and his dark eyes, filled with an intensity one couldn't decipher, kept finding mine across the large room. He anticipated and waited. When the last, after sweet remarks, the wedding planner revealed the groom had a few words with a forced smile, Ethan walked to the podium. A calm voice thanked everyone for arriving. His entire demeanor changed. The courteous groom was replaced by a serious man. As he became serious, the room's banter stopped. He said, "Before my beautiful wife and I have our first dance," with an unexpected resonance, "authority, there is a debt of honor that I must repay." His eyes left the crowd and locked directly onto mine. I felt it like a physical touch. 100 pairs of eyes followed his gaze, a wave of attention rippling across the room until it landed on the forgotten guest at the forgotten table. My mother's serene smile froze and then collapsed at the head table. My father looked as if he'd been struck, his mouth slightly agape. My sister Claire looked bewildered, turning from Ethan to our parents with wide, questioning eyes. Ethan didn't embellish. He told the truth. 8 years ago in Fallujah, he said my vehicle was hit by an IED. My father, recovering from his shock, scrambled to regain control. He grabbed the microphone at his table and forced a brittle, hearty laugh. "My son-in-law," he boomed, echoing in the silent room. What a sense of humor. Always child. No one laughed, a single person. The silence that answered him was absolute, a heavy, damning judgment that left him exposed and foolish under the glittering chandeliers. Then Ethan did something that sealed their fate. He stepped down from the stage, walked past the head table, his new bride, and my stunned parents without a glance. He walked as a soldier across the dance floor, straight to table 12. In the cavernous ringing silence, Private Ethan Walker clicked his heels together, straightened his back like a ramrod, and raised his hand in a salute. It was a textbook military salute, sharp, crisp, and executed with a reverence more powerful than any speech. It conveyed a universe of gratitude, respect, and the unbreakable bond between a soldier and the officer who brought him. Took over an instinct deep in my bones. I slowly rose to my feet, my back straight, and returned his salute with the same sharp precision. For a moment that was it. Just the two of us, a silent island of military honor in a sea of civilian confusion. But then something extraordinary happened. From a table in the corner, an elderly man in a tuxedo, perhaps someone's grandfather, slowly pushed his chair back and rose to his feet. Salute. Then another man, younger, with a telltale haircut, at a table near the front stood up and did the same. And another. One by one, 5 men, veterans, guests my family had invited without knowing who they were, stood and saluted me. In that moment, under the collective gaze of hundreds of strangers, I was no longer the family's awkward secret. United States Army. And for the first time in my life, in my family's world, I was finally seen. The salutes ended, but the ballroom was in a thick, heavy silence filled with 300 people's unspoken shock and judgment. Alistair Finch entered that silence. "If I may have your attention, please," Mr. Finch said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a clear, authoritative tone that cut through the tension like a blade. "My name is Alistair Finch. I was the personal attorney and legal counsel for the late George Hayes." Behind a mask of pure, unadulterated dread, he knew this man and what his presence meant. "This was not part of the wedding program," Mr. Finch continued, his delivery as precise as a legal filing, his gaze sweeping across the stunned audience before settling on my father. Then Mr. Finch's eyes found mine, and he gave me a slow, respectful nod. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice ringing with conviction, "it is my distinct honor to announce that the heir, according to AR's irrevocable will, Captain Nora Hayes." A collective gasp swept the room, followed by a choked, strangled sound from the head table. My mother, Ella Laner, looked as if she might faint, her hand flying to her chest as her carefully constructed world shattered around her. But it was my father who found his voice sputtering with disbelief and rage. "Running a foundation? This is a mistake. Finch, what does this mean?" Mr. Finch looked at my father with a cold, hard face. "On the contrary, Charles," he said, his voice unwavering, "George believed that integrity was more important than financial experience. He believed that a person who understood sacrifice could learn finance, but a person who only understood finance could never learn honor." Sister Claire, her face covered in tears and makeup, finally reacted. She scrambled from her chair, her expensive wedding dress tangling around her feet, and ran toward me, not with understanding but with selfish rage. "You always had to make things about you," screeched, her voice in the quiet hall. "You ruined the most important day of my life because..." I looked at my sister. For the first time, her words didn't hurt. A deep, weary sympathy replaced the sting. She was a child stuck in her own golden cage, unable to see beyond herself. She couldn't imagine a world where anything other than her happiness mattered. I said, "No, Claire," and only she could hear me. "I didn't ruin anything. You ruined it yourself with your own selfishness." My father was walking toward me with his lawyer's intimidation mask on. He said, "We'll sue, to create a private bubble of menace in public." Mr. Finch smiled pitifully. "We'll challenge this trust. This is ludicrous. You won't get a penny." "Good luck, Charles," he remarked quietly, his voice just loud enough for others to hear. "George made legal preparations for this very reason. You'll spend millions of your own money and accomplish nothing but making your lawyers rich." I looked at them one last time, my father sputtering with impotent rage, my mother pale and trembling with social status loss, and my sister weeping for her ruined party. They were no longer the giants who had cast such long oppressive shadows over my life. The foundation of that life had just been pulled out from under them. I didn't need to shout or argue. My victory wasn't in their defeat, but in my own freedom. "This isn't retribution," It's justice, I said, my voice steady, speaking to them and myself. This is about restoring my grandfather's honor. And with that, I turned my back on them. I left the ballroom, leaving behind the I walked away from the remnants of a crumbling legacy, a family that had finally been consumed by its own arrogance and deceit. The heavy ballroom doors swung shut behind me, the sound of a final satisfying click, and for the first time I was free. 6 months later, the world was a different place. The first thing I did when I took over the Hayes Legacy Foundation was redefine its mission. Instead of funding art galleries and social galas like my parents did, I redirected the full resources to establish the George Hayes Honor Scholarship, which was exclusively for children and spouses of service members with a focus on. Every time I approved another scholarship, sending another kid to college, it felt less like administration and more like continuing my grandfather's story. He always reminded me of Matthew 5 verse 16. Let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds. My grandfather had made. I still kept a small bundle of angry, painful letters I had written to my family over the years but never sent. This afternoon, I took the box out to the patio, untied the ribbon, and read them one last time. Not with rage but with a quiet, detached understanding. I had once craved their validation so desperately. Now standing here, I realize that the only approval that matters is own. One by one, I dropped the letters into the small crackling fire in the outdoor chima. The flames licked at the ink-stained pages, consuming the years of anguish and turning them to weightless gray ash. As the last wisp of smoke curled into the sky and vanished, I felt light. I had forgiven myself for letting their definition of me hold me captive for so long. He called me a few weeks after the wedding, his voice heavy, and said he couldn't build a life on lies. He now works for a nonprofit in Virginia that helps veterans transition back to civilian life. Sometimes he'll stop by on a Sunday morning and we'll have coffee on the patio, talking about old comrades and new beginnings. We don't have a romance, just a deep, resilient friendship. As the sun rose over the pidi, painting the water pink and gold, I stood on my patio and breathed in the cool, clean air. The fight was over. I was no longer a soldier on a battlefield. I was a gardener tending to a new legacy. My family tried to bury me, erase me, and dismiss me as a mistake. They didn't know that they were planting a seed, fought this kind of battle in the shadows. So many of us carry silent wounds inflicted by the very people who were supposed to see us, value us. My journey has taught me that your worth is never defined by those who refuse to acknowledge it. It's defined by the honor, peace, and new life you build for yourself. Tail matters.